Good morning, Archie Verse. A little bit of a hidden gem. We're going to do some watch talk this morning. We haven't done a ton of watch talk, I think, over the past week, and yeah, I mean, I like the variety show, but I do like my watches, and this did start off as a watch channel, so I think we'll do a bit of watch talk for the morning. We do have a dungeon coming up in about an hour and 15 minutes with Mental Jock, so this show is linked. So I'll do about an hour and 15 minutes of watch talk with you guys. And then we're going to pass over to the dungeon where Jock is going to go through the drama recap and a ton of recaps over the past, couple of weeks and couple of days. So let's get to it. We got one, you see it in the chat. First one, Archie. Let's go. We've got the band Hingis who showed up, who says, "In your beef with," what is he saying here? Patek Philippe, please elaborate the pros and cons of the CIC Central Impulse Chronometer. We're going to go through that today. And your beef with the world time really being not really accurate is 50%. And your beef with the world time being not really accurate is 50% of all the time. Nah, that's actually true. And we got Tommy joining us. We got Bufaris from the UAE. Nice to see you, Bufaris. And we got Finches of Prey in the chat. Nice to see you guys. So I'm going to cover a couple of the new watch releases on monochrome. We haven't really gone through a lot of these on the channel. They have been covered on other channels, and I kind of wanted to give you my perspective of some of the new watch releases. So let's start off by, just hitting up monochrome and a couple of new watches that have come out that really piqued my interest. The first one was the Raoul Piguet regulator à détente. And this was a collab with the famous enamelist Anita Porcher. Now, for those that don't know, Anita Porcher does the cloisonné dials, or her manufacturer does the cloisonné dials for Patek Philippe on the Worldtime. For those that have seen Jamie Opulence's Worldtime, well, I don't know if they've done his one, but I think they did the generation before, the one that Russ has, the 5131. So Anita Porcher worked with Raoul Piguet on a limited edition. I think this is only 3 pieces of a regulator with a détente escapement. Okay, so what does that mean? So I'm going to break it down for you guys. I'm going to break down the nerdiness for you guys. I think Dodger likes that. So first point, it's a regulator. So what is a regulator? It's a certain, it is, if you want to look at a regulator, the way you view the timing on a dial, you can see the hours on the small subset here. You got the minutes on the outer track, and then you got the small seconds here at 6 o'clock. So different way of displaying the time in the regulator model. Patek Philippe has regulator watches that you guys may be familiar with. Maybe I'll pull one up if I can find one. Let me find a Patek regulator watch for you guys to understand what the layout means, first of all, because that is an important piece of like what this watch is about, is the layout of the regulator. So I'll just show you guys what a Patek regulator looks like. Similar story, right? You've got the time being displayed. Now this is obviously also an annual calendar, but you can see the way the time is displayed on the regulator is a bit different than what's traditional. So that's the first part of this watch is, it is a regulator. So cool. Some people like it, some people don't. Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of regulators. The only reason I like the Patek regulator is because of the story. It was actually made, the watch I showed you was actually designed after a clock that was sitting in the CEO of Patek Philippe's office. So bit of story, a bit of history behind it, why I like that. I'm not a huge fan of regulator formats in general. So right out of the gates, when I look at this watch, it doesn't necessarily right away appeal to me. Okay. So then the next step is the dial. So Anita Porcher, famous enamelist, worked on this dial with Raoul Piguet. Now they've been longtime friends. For those that don't know, Raoul Piguet recently won a Louis Vuitton award for his regulateur de détente watch, the watch that doesn't have this specific enamel dial. For example, he makes this in a standard series. Now Anita has worked with Louis Vuitton on their tambour lineups as well, so they do have some history together, and they work together to create this color of looks like a light blue and a yellow. Look, I've been hearing kind of on and offs around this color scheme, this colorway. Like some people love it, some people hate it. I actually like it. I got nothing against this colorway. Where I think a lot of folks were kind of questioning what was going on here was centered around the fact that they're like, well, look, like it's if the whole specialty of it is the enamel, where well, what's so special about it? Because it's kind of just monochromatic in that sense. It's not the colors don't have a lot of depth into them. It's just kind of a singular color, whether in the subdials or in the dial. What I did notice in the article, this is actually really cool. The blue main dial is finished with a matte grand feu enamel set over a white 18 karat white gold base, and it's paired with a glossy yellow grand feu enamel for the side. So it is elaborate. It's not just basic in that sense. I think Archie kind of was like, well, it's kind of a little basic, like, what really went into the craftsmanship of this. You do have an 18K white gold base, and I believe that they mentioned it was about 7 or 8 different like attempts on or color changes before they kind of like locked it in. So, they spent a lot of time and effort on it, but the reality is that as a consumer, is it super special? I don't know, right? Like, I can appreciate that you guys spent a lot of time on it, but is that going to translate into something that I want to buy? Right. So I'm showing you guys the watch on the wrist right now. And I think this is where most consumers are going to look at the watch and see whether it's for them or not. So we got Dirk Diggler commenting in, cool looking watch, but it would take too long for me to figure out how to tell the time. Exactly the point, Dirk, is while we can appreciate, the way the regulator is displaying the time, it does add a level of inconvenience to the user. Um, so right away, right out the gates, regulators are not extremely popular for the exact purpose that Dirk is talking about. Right? They kind of make it an unconventional way of viewing time, and it's not really that interesting to a lot of people. Not a lot of folks are really seeking that out. Now, let's get into really what's important about this watch. So, outside of the aesthetics of it, which, like I said, are pretty contentious. Like, I could see it being both ways. Some people can like the simplicity of it. Some people think it's too plain or too, just not enough oomph, I guess, for whatever the price tag is of this watch. Now, the real technical specification of this is not when you hear the term regulateur à détente, right? Like, that means essentially in French, it's a regulator with a detent escapement. Okay, so the regulator we covered. What does that mean? The detent escapement is not a complication, guys. So understand, the complications like, when you hear the term like a tourbillon is a complication. Tourbillon is not a complication. It improves accuracy. It's a technical improvement, you could call it, and it's the same thing with a détente regulator. Now, I'm not going to go into the hardcore technicals of it because there's other channels for that, and Higgins really did a good job going in depth on the Elite Horology channel yesterday. But I'm going to show you guys essentially what a détente escapement means in layman terms, in a simple visual. Okay, so I'll read this out for you guys. You can see a little bit of a visual here. Hopefully this is showing the visual. Yeah, it is showing. Okay, cool. So this is going to give you guys a bit of a visual of how the détente escapement works. But like the lever escape system, the détente escapement is a detached escapement allowing the balance wheel to swing undistributed during most of its cycle, except for the brief impulse period. And you guys can see that when it actually um, when it actually moves here on the screen. But while the lever escapement gives 2 impulses per cycle, the détente escapement gives 1 impulse per cycle every other swing, and you can see that in the diagram, interfering with the balance as little as possible. Now, what that means to most of us, that are just buying watches and don't really care about too deep in the mechanics is, essentially it is trying to improve the accuracy of the watch. Now, this is an important point, right? So if you're pitching a watch, a regulator à détente, piece, and you're selling this watch, and I believe the price tag is quite substantial on this piece. Now, customers are going to, they're going to want to know what am I buying for that kind of money, right? And I would say that most customers out there, like, the reality is that how many of us really even care about superlative chronometer or care about the Metas accuracy or the Patek? Most people don't even know the Patek Philippe seal actually includes accuracy of -3 +2 seconds per day, which is very close to Rolex's superlative chronometer of -2 +2. The reality is, guys, it improves chronometric accuracy using the détente regulator, the détente escapement. However, the reality is that I would say most buyers don't give a shit. They don't care how accurate their watches are. They even find it like besides the point of a watch is to seek out absolute accuracy. Because like we all know, we can go buy a cheap ass fucking quartz watch and it'll probably be more accurate than most of these pieces that you could spend 80, 100,000 plus. I don't really understand the purpose of these watchmakers that are trying to really push the envelope on accuracy, I guess, because -2 +2. I mean, I think that's pretty freaking accurate. Like, do you really need to be every day -1 or +1 second? Like, do you really need that in your life? And I think for most consumers that are buying these watches, they really don't, and they really don't care too much about it. So Overall, from my perspective, a nice looking piece, something I can appreciate. Definitely not something I would buy, simply for the fact, kind of what Dirk was saying around cool looking watch, but can't figure out how to read the time. Don't really like the regulator um, layout. While I can appreciate, the work and how difficult it was to create the Daytona escapement, again, I think it misses the point. And I think for Raul Pagesh, it makes sense because he's using this as a springboard to showcase his technical talent, which is totally makes sense. Um, as a buyer, not really something that I think most consumers are going to care about. As we were talking about independence and all these, regulators and Daytona escapements, and you'll see soon enough remontoirs, like these additions on technical accuracy, to me, I don't think have a lot of impact when it comes to impressing a client, or the average consumer, or even, and maybe that's not who this is for, but I think to appreciate these brands, you really got to be seeking out certain things, and I'd say that most people aren't. There are those that seek out art. The enamel piece from Anita Porcher, that probably I'd say what drives me the most into this kind of a piece. But the technical improvements, I think most buyers out there just won't really give a shit. We got CB here, says my experience is that these watches are not really more precise than a Rolex. It's a good point, CB. Like I've seen tourbillons and other pieces that add, or are supposed to add, um, chronometric accuracy, are not necessarily more accurate than your standard superlative chronometer or Patek Philippe seal or Meta cert. Like those three, the superlative chronometer, the Patek seal, and the Meta certification, all ensure a very accurate watch. Your watch will probably be +1, +2 a day, which is like for most of us, that's good enough. Um, I can't see the person that's so obsessed with chronometric accuracy, in a mechanical watch, that would be seeking out a Daytona escapement, to do that. Like the buyer for this watch, in my opinion, is somebody who's looking for art, somebody who's looking for something unique, um, probably related to the Anita Porcher connection. That's where I would see a buyer of this watch. But like I said, Raul Pagesh does make these watches in a standard non Anita Porcher enamel dial, that you can see on your own. But that's kind of my hot take on it. Nice piece, cool piece. I mean, I can't see a market for this for most people. So we got Dirk Diggler, who says Grand Seiko are more accurate than a Rolex. And Omega, yeah, Grand Seiko, a high accuracy quartz would definitely be more accurate. A big fallacy on Grand Seiko, guys, is the finishing. You've heard, like, when Grand Seiko first came out, we used to hear all this like Rolex killer and Patek killer and stuff like that. And at a time, I would agree that Grand Seiko was bringing a lot of value for money, bang per buck, compared to a Rolex. Particularly in the dial category. I think that's where Grand Seiko really shines. Um, I don't think case design, bracelets, they're any good, in my opinion. And in terms of finishing, I mean, like I'm gonna quote Tim Masso: a Grand Seiko is finished as good as a fucking Breitling. Like, for those that are trying to tell you that a Grand Seiko, like most Grand Seikos, I would say, not every Grand Seiko, but for someone who's going to try to tell you it's finished to the quality of a Geneva seal, clearly does not know what they're fucking talking about. So just be careful with that. Jonathan Cole Higgins, Patek fanboys are generically unable to appreciate chronometric precision. Facts, that's actually untrue. Because like I said, the Patek Philippe seal, I'm the one who knows this. Most people don't know this. Is the Patek Philippe seal ensures -3 +2, accuracy per day. Which, to be honest with you, with a watch that's decorated, to the extent that it's been decorated, and the per I'm back now. I was lagging there for a bit. Sorry about that. But like I was saying, I think that the superlative chronometer, the Patek seal, I think they're just good enough. Like you don't need more accuracy than that. So for me, this doesn't really appeal too much. We got CB, who says to be super performing, they need frequent maintenance. This is another good point, right? Is once you buy these pieces, over time, like what is going to be longevity of these pieces. And it's, it's a real point around, like, okay, you buy this watch for 80,000 euro, 100,000 euro, whatever it may be. You know, what is your long term strategy? Like, are you just planning to flick it in a couple of years? I mean, that's what I'd be doing if I got one of these, because there are probably those collectors that really want them. But am I going to keep this for 20 years and ensure that it's going to be able to keep running? I don't know, right? I don't know if Raul Pagash will be around. I don't know if his manufacturer will be around. I don't know if I'll be able to service this at all, right? So yeah, I mean, whether it's in long term or short term CB, it's a valid point with independence. Like, and honestly, like, those of us that have high horology pieces, getting servicing from the major guys ain't always a treat either. So take that with a grain of salt when you deal with independence. My G Shock is more accurate than those Geneva Steel movements. What's the point? That's exactly it, though. Higgins is. I would say the same to the manufacturers. What's the point? Like, why are you chasing chronometric accuracy? We understand that, like, mechanical watches probably will never get to that accuracy level of a quartz piece. So, while I, can appreciate maybe the struggle and the interest to go to that route, I just think in the modern day and age, it's obsolete, right? It's like the internal combustion engine trying to keep up with, the EVs. Eventually, it's just not going to happen, right? So, it's going to be more about the craftsmanship and less about the piece. And that's why I would say that the appeal on this piece is less about the Daytona escapement and more about the actual dial itself. Okay. Tan is hotspotting an Archie SIM card. Yeah, I don't know if let me know if the audio's gotten a bit better. It was just, yeah, my Wi-Fi was just a bit shit. And CB says, Higgins, I am talking about your Lange. Yeah, maybe his Lange is not as accurate as a Rolex or similar accuracy, right? You got Rich Mitch, who says, thank you for the watch talk. I'm relatively new to watches and I'm thirsty for knowledge. I used to watch 4P, but he's gone political and most other big channels are about drama and timepieces. Yeah, Rich. Yeah, I appreciate the super chat, £5. Thank you so much, Rich. Rich, if there's any watches you want to talk about, I'm just kind of doing a bit of a recap today on some of the new pieces that came out. But yeah, I agree with you. A lack of watch talk. And so usually I'm part of the groups that will talk about these kind of high horology pieces as well. But I like to break it down in simplistic terms for those that have an interest eventually to maybe look at these kind of watches in the future. So this was the Raoul Pagache regulator à détente. I would say if I were to give it a score out of 10, for me, it's about a 6 out of 10. And most of that 6 is Anita Porche's dial. The rest of it, I'm not super impressed. The movement's good. I would agree the finishing is a couple nice interior angles on the movement. But 6.5 out of 10, in my opinion, Mr. Higgins. So, all right, we're going to go through another one here. One we haven't really covered. This is the Bernhard Lederer central impulse chronometer. Now in a newer size, this is a 39 mil watch. So I'm gonna just start by the aesthetics of the dial in and of itself. Okay, so I, I think the boys yesterday were saying, when you let a watchmaker kind of decide on how to design a piece, this is kind of what comes out. And I said, these 10-hour or these 10-minute increment marks look like a soccer or football keeper's goal, and it looks like it looks like the keeper itself is the one in the numbers, kind of a thing. So design wise, it's just a bit, I don't know. I don't really like it. I don't think it looks very good. This is a very, very expensive piece, as you guys will see in a bit. But just right out the gates, I would see most people just overlooking this watch. And you can see here right away, like, hard pass, right? Like this is important for a watch manufacturer. Your watch needs to be visually appealing. For watch manufacturers to simply say, "Oh, the proof is in the pudding," or "everything's on the backside." Like, the reality is that most watch buyers, most watch collectors don't look at the backside of a piece or don't understand what's going on in the movement or the finishing. So, you really need to have a visually stunning piece dial up. You really do. And I'll say this to independent watchmakers, the main brands, like, you need to have a visually stunning dial and just a dial side. And this just falls short. I believe I was calling out the lugs on this piece, like, just not little stubby lugs, just not really, I don't know, just not really, just very plain, just very unimaginative, dial up. So now, obviously, that tells only a little part of the story. Um, when I show you guys the movement of this piece, you're gonna understand what I mean. Now, really, the masterpiece is right here in the movement. I'm gonna try to zoom in, but not zoom in too close. I think a lot of folks have heard the term remontoire. Um, I'm going to. I love looking at the backsides. And I do. I'll state that up front. So I'll get into what a remontoire is before we look at this, just for everybody's, to keep catch everybody up, because how many of us hate going to shows and they're talking about shit that we have no idea what it means. So I'll talk about a remontoire here. I got a little diagram, makes it simple. So showing you on the left here what a traditional single mainspring with a gear train looks like. On the left side of the diagram. So with the single mainspring applying torque at the balance via a gear train, there's a large difference in the torque applied over time as the energy dissipates. So you can see here on the left, the torque decreases over time, whereas with a remontoire applied between the mainspring and the balance, there is a lot less deviation in that torque curve essentially over time. So again, we're talking about a system that improves chronometric accuracy. You can see here on this, and I'll kind of highlight here. You got two mainsprings, you got two separate gear trains. On this piece, when and a lot of folks have heard of the FP Journe remontoirs. Like, all this is, guys, is the same thing realistically as what the other manufacturer, Piguet, is trying to accomplish, or FP Journe, or a tourbillon manufacturer's chronometric accuracy. Fusée and chain, also similar. I wouldn't say similar concept, but a concept again around chronometric accuracy. And also, guys, the point is, who cares, right? This is what I'm going to state up front. For those getting really, really bored with the movement talk, it also comes to who cares, right? Like, most people don't care that their watch is super accurate. Most people care about, does my watch look cool? Is it visually appealing? Does it speak to me? Et cetera, right? So CB says 10, even remontoirs are theoretically more accurate, in reality, so, right? Like, part of this, in my opinion, is, look, I respect the manufacturers for trying to improve and continue to improve chronometric accuracy, right? I think superlative chronometer, Metas, or the Patek Seal, all three of them are, well, like, a deviation of 5 seconds realistically at the top end, I think, in my opinion, is pretty good. You don't realistically in the regular day need to use more than that. So if CB, who has experience with a lot of these watches and or seeing a lot of these watches, says, even though in theory they may be they may be more accurate, in reality they may not necessarily be. So you may be spending 100,000 plus euro on these pieces and not necessarily be getting what you're paying for. So if that's all you're seeking and you're not getting that, my answer is, to these manufacturers, is, what's the point, right? Like, what is the fucking point with these watches? And they're trying to market to you that, oh, it's all this technical innovation that went into it. And look, this is visually, as a movement, it is a very visually striking movement. I do find it very visually appealing. I do find if you look at the case, it's not kind of flat. I think Higgins described this yesterday on his show on the Elite Horology channel, that the sapphire is not just flat, as you can see, has a bit of contour to it. So that is really cool. Like, this is something different by Bernhard Lederer. But this is really a situation of a butterface. This is all good but her face on this, and I'm just gonna have to really give this one also a really low score, in the sense of, appreciate the technical accuracy, appreciate the the beauty of this movement is actually quite spectacular. And there's a really cool story around this watch and Bernhard Lederer, that I do think you guys should look into. The story about him seeking out a book written by Piguet that has a history of making movements and all different types of watches that Piguet created. Really cool story about the watchmaker, and everything else, which I can definitely appreciate. However, again, for most of us that are looking to buy watches, that are scrolling through, this doesn't mean a lot to us. You'll probably scroll right over this, and this is $100,000 piece. So a bit of a bit of I think that this brand or this manufacturer, while I understand what they were trying to do from a technical innovation perspective, really as a production watch, not super interesting to me. Um, I'll probably pause a bit before I get into Blancpain here. I'll just check out the chat. So we got Jonathan Cole Higgins the third. Tan, if Tudor moves Metas, will they stop the movement swapping? If Tudor moves to Metas, will they stop the movement swapping during service? It's a good point. Tudor is known to swap movements on their chronometer pieces in recent times, not servicing them. And the question too, Jonathan, is like, well, does it matter to you as a consumer, right? Like, essentially, when you do a movement repair, anyways, you are just interchanging parts from manufactured parts for that movement. So whether you have the same movement or a new movement, you know, to some people won't really matter. In the concept of collecting vintage watches, this is an important thing, guys. Most vintage collectors honestly give two shits about the movement. This isn't car collecting, guys. We're not looking for matching serial number engines to everything else necessarily on a lot of stuff. A lot of the times, parts in vintage watches will be replaced at service in the movement, and especially with vintage Rolex, it doesn't necessarily affect the value. Now, whether an entire movement's replaced or not, it's a completely different story. But yeah, I don't know the answer to that one. Jonesy says, Archie, any advice on Ladyboys on Soy Nana? I think Archie can give you that advice. Jonesy will probably have him online in about 8 hours. We've got CB says, I find new Rolex and Patek to be the most accurate. Yeah, honestly, CB, my 5196 with a 215 movement, which is like, God, it's what, 50 years old, is as accurate as my modern Rolexes are. So, I mean, these guys can make these movements pretty damn accurate. It's just to the point where, at what point, CB, is there diminishing returns, right? At what point is most consumers aren't going to give a shit about chronometric accuracy? Why do people like the FP Journe remontoire? Like, why do they like that? Like, because it's a hype watch, it's a good looking watch. Most people don't understand what it does, but it's FP Journe. That's why people like that. Like, they don't like it because they have a deep understanding of how the remontoire system works and the constant force being applied. God, people don't give a shit about that, guys. Come on, let's be real. Let's be real here. I'm gonna tell you guys straight. I understand this shit. Like the back of my hand. Like, I understand it, and I'm still not even fucking convinced because I don't see the point. Higgins said it himself. He can buy a fucking G-Shock and be more accurate. What is the point? Why would I spend 100,000 euro on a watch like that simply because the manufacturer has put a bit of effort? Like, cool, man. Not really what I'm gonna do. It looks like cock and balls. There you go, 30 Danny. This show is like Rich Wass ESPN. Yes, sir. And yes, CB, reliable. Lange needs oil like my Ferrari. Ooh, choice words, CB. Choice words. We got Sturdy Danny in the house, and we got Fella. Here's a good one. Fella's my man when it comes to talking about the FP Journe market. He's often a guy I do speak to about that. As I was interested, and I am still interested in potentially adding a Journe into the collection. It's just got to be the right one, and I don't necessarily need to chase the hype behind a Chronomètre Bleu. I like the Souverain. I like a lot of his watches. And I actually am a fan of the remontoire. I tried on the 38 mil in platinum last year in Boston, and I fell in love with it. I absolutely love that watch. So what does Fella say? Fella says it's just a market sizing question. It's a small market. Who cares, right? And it's still a good point, though, right, Fella? Like, you're talking about a market that's even smaller. The people that are buying these Raoul Pagaches and Bernhard Lederers, or even MBNFs and Journes, a very, very small market in and of itself. So if you're already vying for a small market, what are those collectors looking for, right? A lot of them are looking for something unique, something special, something that they're not going to see on the wrist of another guy that they go to a Red Bar meet or a Watch Time New York meetup. They want to be different, right? And to me, being different by the improvement of accuracy in that sense, like if you had complications and you had dials and unique stuff that, really, like, for example, if you had a piece unique dial that was, whether it's a custom world time or, different type of piece unique in terms of the fact that you had, special enameling done, to me makes more sense to a consumer because they can appreciate that, they can enjoy that versus chronometric accuracy, right? Like, so yeah, fella, you're absolutely right. Smaller market, but I think like this, even in that market, like it's not a fit, dude. Like I wouldn't be buying this, and I can't really see why anybody would. Um, all right, let's keep going here. I have to go now. What is he saying here? I have to go now. You can ask channel on my channel. I can give you my email. Yep. Yeah, for sure. CB, the best Journe, in my opinion, is the Optimum. All right, let's look at the Optimum. FP Journe Optimum. Let's have a look. All right, I'll pull up from the FP Journe site. I won't be Archie for you here, CB. I'll actually put it up from the site. Beautiful platinum case. Whatever, I'll accept these. Fuck off these cookies. All right, so we've got a white gold dial that's been guilloche'd. So have a look. You can see the guilloche. You can see the guilloche pattern on the dial. Remontoir d'égalité avec escapement BHP. All right. I haven't actually seen this watch, CB. So let me have a look. 1510 manual wind. Balance, chronometric balance. All right, actually, there's a quote here from Journe. I designed the chronometre Optimum in 2001. It was the first time that I integrated the deadbeat seconds into my constant force remontoir. This deadbeat seconds can clearly be seen as natural due to the to being linked to the 1 second remontoir. In this watch, the constant force remontoir is visible, while in the second hand of the mail dial ticks away at a speed of 3 hertz, i.e., 6 times per second, and the frequency of the escapement. All right, so deadbeat seconds and remontoir. Now. Really cool looking piece, honestly, CB. I think that, it's funny because I think Bear said it. He hates deadbeat seconds because he doesn't want his watch looking like a quartz watch. Yeah, I actually don't mind FP Journe's remontoirs and deadbeat seconds. So pretty cool. Sorry, Dan, did Higgy get ripped off of that Lange and should he bought a Patek instead? Good question. Did Higgy get ripped off? So number one, he can't get a fusee and chain with Patek because they don't make a fusee and chain as part of their movements. So no, he wouldn't have been able to get a Patek for that purpose. And I knew Danny, he was specifically looking for the fusee and chain. Also, a very, a fusee and chain. Remontoir, all this stuff, all these technical innovations are all related to improving the accuracy of your watch, and coupled obviously with the tourbillon on Higgins's watch, right? Like that whole purpose of that watch is for accuracy. And he said it himself. I think he said his watch is running like +1 seconds per day, which is no different, Danny, than superlative chronometer. Most of I think my Hulk is running +1 seconds per day, for example. So it's kind of CB's point. Like it's a $200,000 watch that is realistically in the regular use of watches, not any more accurate than your run-of-the-mill Submariner that could, you could probably pick up for, in the teens, right? Big Tony, I don't think he's allowed to join the streams. He is banned, my man, banned. We got Feller in the chat saying, there's 1,000 people in the world who care about these minute details about movements in time. There's like 1,000. Yeah, look, there's 1,000 people. They make 3 of these. And really, fella, if you think about that 1,000, over time, I don't know where it's going to go, because if these independent brands don't actually launch, right? If Raoul Piguet doesn't actually get off the ground, well, if you just bought this watch, like in 15 years or 10, let's say you truly are a collector and you want to collect this watch, or you want to add it to your collection and you use it like a regular watch, or like a watch, and you need to get it serviced, like, well, what's going to happen, right, in 15 years, 20 years? Where is the longevity? Now look, the story of FP Journe may be different than this, right? They have investment from big brands. There potentially is longevity and posterity after the watchmaker is gone. I would just err on the side of like, there's a lot of independents out there, guys, and not all these independents will likely exist in in 2 decades. So be very careful around what you're buying right now, and that's why a lot of folks. That's why these the big brands are still around. The Vacherons, the Pateks, the APs. They're still around because they have a history of being around, and people are more safe. A lot of people just feel more safe. Archie even says it. I feel more safe buying a Patek Philippe than I do buying an MB&F, even though I love MB&F. Right? Like that's just the reality of the game. Yeah, that's right. He's exclusive. Higgy is one of the 1,000. Now, look, fella, Higgy may be one of the 1,000 people, but he ain't got the money for these. So Higgy's definitely not buying, an FP Journe, Optimum. Now he did spend a significant amount on his Pour le Mérite, Richard Lange. Beautiful watch. I really like it. I think that again, I think his reaction when he got the piece, I think the reaction from the Archieverse as well as the community on the other side of the fence was somewhat lukewarm, and I tried to explain to him why it was lukewarm. The reaction uh to his tourbillon with Fusée and Chain was lukewarm because of the same things I've been saying all day. Not many people give a shit about accuracy. Most people know a tourbillon has no real function. It's beautiful to look at, right? Like, cool. It's cool to look at, but I mean, you can probably get something similar with a hillbilly tourbillon, in that respect. So, I kind of explained it to him. I said, really cool piece to a guy like me who maybe, like fella said, part of that 1,000, but for the mainstream, they're not going to understand it. And if that watch isn't more accurate than a fucking Rolex, you're going to get trolled. And I think that's what CB has been pointing out. So we got Canuck Watch Collector, a fellow Canadian. When watch brands invest in architectures that improve accuracy, I'd like to see that. I'd like to see that in practice. Otherwise, what's the point? It is not a quartz, but still. Yeah, look, I think that accuracy is really. I think we're really in diminishing returns, Canuck Watch Collector. And when we're in diminishing returns right now, in terms of how close we can get to accuracy, the real point comes into what's practical. Like, is absolute accuracy in a fraction of seconds practical for our everyday needs? Right? I think Metas, at 5 second deviation, is I don't even think Kosk is completely satisfactory for everyday use. So unless you really, really, really give a shit about accuracy, which, like I said, I've been collecting for a long time. I've met very few people. Most of the people I meet don't even set their fucking watch. Right? I'm the guy who will go to time.gov and I'll fucking set every single time. I'll set it to exactly what time it is because I care about how much time I'm losing or gaining. But like I said, I'm very much in the minority. Most people will just pick up their watch. Half of them don't even like to set it, and they just go. So, that should tell you something about who's going to be buying these watches. Big Tony says throw a Cat Higgins. Let's see what the pigeons do. Yeah, I'd love to see that. CB says it's easy to read and well balanced. All right, I'm getting a little behind on the chatter. It's 30 Danny Tan. What do you think of the Jaquet Droz bird repeater? Let me look up that. I haven't seen that watch in a while actually. Jaquet Droz bird repeater. I remember liking that watch when I first saw it. I think they have a new one here. The bird repeater. Honestly, man, like if I won the Powerball there, Danny, I'd probably buy this for Marcelo, and I would have him. This would be Marcelo's daily watch, the Jaquet Droz bird repeater. I like this. You get the little treble clef right here to show you the showcase the sound. Some people might find that corny. I actually find that interesting. Yeah, let me pull up this watch and see. Let's look at the specs here, Danny. Just off the rip, like aesthetically, I think really really cool. A lot of folks I know are you got to also like the bird theme, right? Like that's why I said Marcelo right away would be the guy to think about for this watch. So let me read some of these technical specs just to get more info. So the case is 18 karat red gold. 47 millimeters, Danny. That's a chunky. That's a big one. That might be too big for me. Dial's hand engraved and painted mother of pearl, black onyx center, hand engraved and painted birds. Okay, so it's onyx and hand engraved. Okay, very cool. Frequency 18,000. So it's a traditional, essentially low beat, you could call it. Movement, 48-hour power reserves. Ooh, this is a lot of joules, man. 69 joules. That's a fuck ton of joules, bro. Because I remember like my 5212 had like 50 joules, and I thought that was a lot. Like 69 joules. It's a lot. Yeah, let me show you guys this piece. The bird minute repeater by Jaquet Droz. You know what? Don't dislike it. Again, right? Like it's you got to be really into the theme. So the only person I know who would be deep into this would probably be Marcelino. So he would be the person, Danny, that I would buy this watch for. His, and look, you get a bit of the figure eight, design of Jaquet Droz from the essentially the onyx center dial, as well as you can see the figure eight pattern with the bird's nest at the bottom. So definitely pretty cool. I actually don't mind Jaquet Droz. I know a lot of people hate Jaquet Droz. Funny story, Danny. Last time I think one of the last times I met Jin, and for those that don't know, I used to do live streams with Jin. Jin and I would be Archie's panelists back in the day. Last time I met him when he came by my city, I think I was selling him. No, I think I was buying back my Reverso. I don't remember exactly. I think I was buying back my Reverso 976 from him that I sold to him, and he brought it in a Jaquet Droz bag and asked me if I wanted to keep the bag. And I was like, snobbery wise, I was like, nah, I can't be seen with a Jaquet Droz bag, kind of a thing. So just a bit of comedy for you there on Jaquet Droz. But we got CB. The resonance is hard to read in real life. It actually is. I tried it on CB the 38 millimeter in platinum last year. Again, fit amazing, looked amazing. But I would agree, not probably the best from a viewing perspective. Fellas says, Tan, it's like investing in a startup. If it does well, you participate in upside by owning a piece, and owning it early. If it doesn't, you lose. Yeah, that's absolutely right, fella. I would agree with you on that assessment. It is like investing in a startup, and that's actually a really good point. And again, right, like not everybody's in, the industry that, in certain industries where this may be a lot more prevalent. Not everybody's maybe into, where startups are is mostly tech, you could say these days. It doesn't have to be in tech, but I think that's probably the most common place you hear about startups. And yeah, I mean, absolutely, right? You're investing and owning a piece early, and, the payoff is huge and the burn is huge, right? Like, I think Rishepi's original pieces were like 50 grand, something like. They weren't expensive. Like, they weren't, I mean, they're not expensive. Don't get me wrong. 50 grand's a lot of money, but like that watch is, I mean, they're like hundreds of grand now. Like so the payoff can be big if you invest in the right, or you buy. I don't want to use the term investing. You buy the right piece because it could pay off. However, if the brand does not take off, I mean, if I go back to monochrome, I mean, there's tons of other brands here. Like if I just go back, and I'll just pull up a quick example of a brand. So this is a Finnish brand. Kuvokoski, I think, is Koivukoski is the brand name. Now, when you look at this brand, right off the rip, when I look at this watch, and I'll take this off. From a design perspective, like this is very Kari Voutilainen, right? You got the teardrop lugs. You've got these. I forget, like Clive has a term for these. Like I don't know if you call these palm style hands. These could be considered kind of like palm style hands or the Piguet hands. And you got kind of a lollipop second hand. Like this is a very much a Kari Voutilainen design. Now, Koivukoski is also Finnish, so I don't know if he's just trying to emulate the Voutilainen design and make that a Finnish thing. I don't know. Right. But this would be an example of what fella's talking about. It's like investing in a startup, right? Like there's a ton of these independents out there. Not everyone is a Rishepi or a Raoul Pagesh or, or an MB&F, right? Not all of them are taking off. There's a shit ton of them that are going to be like this, where the payoff could be huge if you get in early, but you could also be you could be lighting your money on fire, right? Do I like this watch? Look, I love the way Voutilainen does his designs. Not for everybody. Not everybody likes the teardrop looks on the lugs. But this, to me, when I saw this piece, was originally very Voutilainen. Now, this, in my opinion, is quite interesting. It is pretty different from a world time perspective than I've ever really seen. Let me look at Koski's city names here on the ring. So, interestingly enough, he has yeah, this is really interesting. This is like a vintage, because you can see these. Maybe I gotta zoom this in, because these time zones aren't, like, this must be either a vintage inspired piece or a vintage piece, but these time zones aren't even real time zones anymore. If you think about it, like you can see here, you've got India. India has like you got Mumbai, Dhaka, and Calcutta. India only has one time zone now. It's only the half-hour time zone. If you go here, you can see Denver and Chicago are in different time zones for some reason. You got California in a different time zone. So, well, sorry, Denver's in Mountain, Chicago's in Central. Sorry, so those are right. And you got, sorry, California and Klondike here over the Central time, over the Pacific time zone. I wasn't sure if Klondike, Alaska, Honolulu, Alaska, Klondike, California. Yeah, Klondike and California are supposed to be, I believe, different time zones from back in the day. Interestingly, New York is New York. It's probably, it could be in a different language. And Montreal, this is the classic way of the Patek Philippe used to do it. My favorite way of doing it, where I actually had a Canadian city on the dial, but also that actually caught my attention as being a little bit interesting. We do have a super chat here, so I'm not gonna ignore the money. We got Alibaba 69. Thank you so much, $5. You think a stainless black sub date is a nice beater work watch? I think they look cool. Yeah, man. Like, you can't beat a stainless black sub date. Like, I always tell anybody that is looking to get a watch that may not be looking to become a watch collector, I say, look, whether you know or not that you're going to become a watch collector, I would say your first two starter luxury watches, should either be a Submariner or a Datejust. And you will find which one appeals to you more. And the reason why I still recommend the Datejust is, guys, there are still people out there that prefer a watch that is a bit dressier. I think Buckley was saying it on one of the other shows the other day. He was wearing his Datejust, and he said, like, when I look at it in the mirror, I see myself, in a mirror or whatever. Like, it just looks like luxury. Like, the Datejust is an extremely popular model, guys, and I would still recommend it. However, Uzi Diamond, you can't go wrong with a sub. That is like literally probably your sweet spot luxury watch. You can't beat it. Probably the absolute most epic watch of all time, in my opinion. So yeah, go fill your boots with that one. I love a 10 and how it's animated. Yeah, man. Sorry, I just don't have a lot of time on the show, Danny, where I can spend a ton of time. Thank you, Reaper. Yeah, we're spending time talking watches. A lot of folks have been a little, they've been a little, I think a little restless about the watch talk. But like, look, like this guy's pieces, as opposed to the other watches we were looking at earlier, I actually think this watch looks pretty nice. Like, it looks pretty, it looks aesthetically, right? Just, I like it. I like the way this looks. A lot of people won't, right? I know a lot of people hate the teardrop lugs. They find it kind of shitty. Now, I'm going to bring up a point that I'll pull up CB here. One of our 100 independents makes it. My suggestion is to be very careful. Yeah. Look, there's a lot of folks that are dipping their toes in the independent market. I would recommend speaking to those people before. They're always around in the chat. CB is one of them. Russell 996, can give you some insight as well. We've got a lot of folks out there that, obviously Higgins, whenever he's around on his show, that can give you insight into, what independence and why, and really, I'm trying to break independence down into, like, why would you buy this watch, right? Like, so, and this is a classic example, right? Like, to me, this guy, I don't think has I don't know if he's going to have a ton of longevity, because I just really see this as another Voutilainen, but that's just what I'm looking at on the surface. But the first impression is probably the most important impression, right? Like, when we go back to that world time of this guy, like, I think most people, if you guys saw this on the table, this would be a hard pass for most people. They just wouldn't find this to be an appealing watch. They wouldn't dig the design. The lugs are pretty straight. Like, I can't see most people digging this. However, a guy like me, who's a bit nerdy into, like, looking at world times as being a time capsule, right? Like, when I see names on these dials or on these chapter rings that be like Klondike, like, you don't hear the term Klondike anymore, or you see a full Rio de Janeiro on the dial, which you don't see anymore either, or Cabo Verde, like, interesting. It adds a bit of interest to me Is that going to put me over the line to buy a, let's say if this was 40 grand? Probably not. Anderson Genève, we've seen, have done a retro design Worldtimer as well. And I was on the panel with Benjamin Chi when Higgins was showcasing it on the Swiss and John show. I think that was either the last episode or one of the last episodes we did. Ben Chi came on, and I kind of told Ben straight up, I was like, I just don't like the way it looks. And these are fashion too, guys. Like, fashion is a big part of this. So if you're a new collector, or you're one of those guys that kind of gets into a situation where one of those guys kind of snubs their nose at you, or kind of looks down at you because you don't know a bit about movement finishing, you don't like, I'll tell you something, 90% of all this shit is just looks. It's aesthetics. So you're 90% of the way there already, right? Like, the reality is that you're buying this watch to put on the wrist for you to look good, or for it to look good as you are observing it or enjoying it, right? If it ain't appealing to you in that way visually, it's just not good. That's like 90% of the game, guys. The rest of the 10% is really just understanding what the manufacturer is trying to market to you, right? What is the value of the watch, right? Like, I'll pull up, I'll pull up Patek's website, and I'll pull up a world time. So I'll go to the complications section. They don't have a ton of world times anymore. I believe the cloisonné dial is still there, so I'll pull that one up here. So this is a cloisonné dial, 5231 world timer, and what is why? Like, what is this manufacturer trying to pitch here, right? Like, the world time complication is inaccurate. Like, right now, North America has hit daylight savings a few weeks ago, and other areas of the world haven't moved an hour ahead. So the watch is inaccurate. It doesn't have a functional purpose. But that, is beside the point of this watch. This watch is meant to evoke emotion. It's meant to be an art piece. You've got, a perfect cloisonné dial that, I don't know, other channels are claiming are lacquered over because Jamie Opulence's dial was so perfect on the enamel, compared to maybe another Anderson Genève Worldtimer that may not have been perfect. I don't know. But is that smoke on the dial? I don't know which dial you're referring to, but I don't think it is. Maybe it was just the shitty picture, Kent. But again, the purpose, invoke emotion, right? Like, when you buy, so these are also from Patek, are rare handicrafts. I don't know too much about this. I don't know if you could specific, because I know for a fact Jamie's his dial layout's different. He has, I believe, North America and Central America centered on his center of his dial. This one is more Asian centric, as well as Australia and Oceania, I guess you could say, in terms of the continents. But the point is that they're supposed to be personalized. They're supposed to be visually appealing. That is the point of these watches. Romanticism, evoke emotion, beauty. These lugs on this watch are one of the most beautiful lugs I've seen on any watch that, I've seen or I've owned, specifically. So again, this evokes emotion. You've got a brand that's very strong. You've got a brand who is known and markets that they will service any watch that they've ever created since the 1800s. Okay, there's a lot more of a value proposition in this watch than the Raoul Piguet regulator à détente. I'll just be very honest with you. If you're looking at most buyers, they're going to buy this watch. They're going to understand the enameling. They're going to understand the personalization. They're going to understand the simple beauty of it. And yeah, you don't need to understand what anglage is. You don't need to understand what perlage is. You don't need to understand these specific finishing terms for you to get probably 90% of what this watch is about. And that's the important part, right? Like CB says, Patek has no equal. And I would agree with that in a holistic perspective, right? Does Patek put internal angles on most of their watches? No, they don't. Does Patek do as much hand finishing as Philippe Dufour does? No, they don't, right? Because that's not what they're seeking, right? They are seeking the full package for a customer. And yes, you're going to get finishing that is, very, very good, a very, very high standard of finishing from this watch. Absolutely, you are. So when people compare them to independents, they're like, well, the independent did this. Well, yeah, like when you're making 3 fucking watches a year, or 3 watches in a series, of course you're going to be able to add a couple of internal angles that will take take the time to do by hand. For sure you will. However, again, the value proposition as a customer here, you're getting a watch that has a very strong brand. Obviously a established market for resale if that's if that's your thing. Not, I would say most people that buy this watch probably isn't their thing, but maybe it is. You've got a visually appealing watch, a watch that has a ton of history behind it. Like you just get the full package, honestly, with with Patek versus like these independent brands. We got my boy Mental Jock in the chat. He's going to be starting up the dungeon in about 18 minutes. We're going to be covering drama on the dungeon. I just want to do some watch talk for you guys because I know that we've been starving for watch talk. My boy Uzi Diamond's been struggling, to get some watch talk answered. He's always talking about watches. So I'll pull up his comments here. Uzi Diamond says, Datejust and Subdate are pretty much the same price. Yeah, they are. And honestly, Uzi Diamond, when I first buying my first luxury Rolex, or my first luxury Rolex, my first Rolex, it was between those two, Datejust or Sub. And I actually went Datejust, by the way. I didn't go Sub originally. Funny, at the time, I was told it was a mistake, and I honestly didn't give a shit. I was like, don't matter. Like, this thing's more to me. But yeah, look, for you, Uzi, the Sub, you may, your day-to-day may be a little bit more, you may need something a bit more robust. And if your day-to-day probably requires that, yeah, dude, go for the Sub. Maybe it works better for your attire. For others, the Datejust, like, I think those two, you'll cover most buyers. Most first-time Rolex buyers, outside of maybe the day-date buyer, right? That buyer is different. That's probably somebody later on in life. They want to celebrate an achievement, whether they're retiring or, a milestone or what have you. They're a bit of a different buyer, but I would say most buyers that are looking for their first Rolex, Datejust or Sub, you can't go wrong. Like, those are your top two. Topster McDonkey says the VC Corne de Vache has a teardrop lugs, beautiful watch. Yeah, the Corne de Vache is actually one of my favorite watches from Vacheron. Not really talked about very often. Let me see if I can pull up a Corne de Vache. Vacheron Corne de Vache. For those that don't know, Corne de Vache means in French the horns of a cow. Corne de Vache. Vache means cow in French. Corne is obviously horns. And this is the Corne de Vache lugs. Really, again, like Topster was pointing out, really cool and really makes the watch, in my opinion. Just the way the lines will break the light when this hits, when this is on your wrist, is going to make the watch. I never really was as obsessed with lugs as I have been in like the past, I would say 1.5 years, right? As I have been with lug design and how much of a difference that can make the watch on the wrist. And I'll tell you, like, the Pateks that I own the 5212 weekly calendar that has 2-step lugs. Then I have the perpetual calendar has 3-step lugs, and then I have the Worldtimer that has lugs like this, that are more winglet type lugs, you could call it. And then on the 5196, I have integrated Calatrava style lugs, and really the shape of the lugs have a huge impact in the way they wear on the wrist. But yeah, definitely, Topster, amazing watch. I love the Corne de Vache, and highly recommend this watch if you dig, watches on a strap. Now, I don't like to use the term dress watch because I think that term is outdated. If you think about it, right, like 5 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, Daniel Wellington was an extremely popular watch brand with the youth, obviously because it was cheap. But most Daniel Wellingtons were what we would call dress watches on a leather strap. They weren't sport watches. They weren't Submariner copies. Daniel Wellingtons were watches on a strap. Like, so for everybody to say, oh, dress watches are dead. Well, these, 18 to 20-year-old kids they're not wearing tuxedos to work. They're not wearing tuxedos to events. They're not wearing suits to work. Like, there's no dress watch component to any of this. It's just a watch on a leather strap. And here's the interesting part. I think I don't remember who I said this to yesterday. I think I said it to the rancher. Rancher gave me a call yesterday, and I said, a couple of us have been talking about the fact that the only interesting watches that actually get released are on leather straps. Majority of interesting watches that get released every year are on leather straps. And I'm not talking about changing a dial color on a Rolex or adding a millimeter on a Rolex. That's not fucking interesting, guys. Interesting is, like we saw earlier, people trying to push technical innovation or different, enameling on dials or finishing or just something that somebody hasn't done before is interesting. And the majority of them are on leather straps. Some of the competitors last year that went to Watches and Wiggles said, all the Rolex fans were like, I don't understand why everybody's wearing a dress watch. Well, the reality is that most people who actually are, into watches pretty heavily, they own fucking hierology, which is majority on a strap. They're not your Rolex fanboys. You're not going to go to Watches and Wiggles and see a sea of Submariners, dude. That's just not going to. Industry executives ain't wearing, Submariners. They ain't wearing Seamaster Professional 300s, bro. Like, they're wearing like the hierology shit. If you ever saw a collection review of Jean-Claude Biver, it's mostly like vintage Patek Philippe's. And this is Jean-Claude fucking Biver, guys. So, anyways, bit of a fiery rant this morning. But we got a super chat here from the conductor, $2. I'm a big fan of the Corne de Vache Hodinkee Gray dial. All right, let me look up the Corne de Vache Hodinkee edition. All right. Let me pull up the Hodinkee article. It's fine. Fuck off. Fuck off, Hodinkee. Your shit. All right, the Historique Corne de Vache, a 1955 limited edition for Hodinkee. So, definitely cool, man. Like, I like the vibes of this dial. Yeah, like, honestly, very, 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 very nice looking piece. Pulsation dial. The Romans. This gives me a bit of, it's funny. It's funny. From conductor, I'll show you what vibe of watch this gives me. And you're gonna see that obviously the whole Corne de Vache element of it, the winglet lugs, call it, it doesn't exist in the watch that I'm gonna tell you this looks like to me. Let me see if I can find it here. I think a pulsation dial version of it. Yeah, this one right here. It to me, dude, it looks like the 5170 Patek pulsation dial. Okay, because you got a similar look with the Roman numerals at the 12 and the 6 o'clock. Obviously, also a chronograph with pulsation dial, right? So, and the major difference here is obviously the lugs, right? Like, I'll show you a couple of photos of this watch, if European Watch Co. will agree with me. And so you can obviously see these lugs, are not like the winglet style lugs, right? They're more integrated into the case. You can see it kind of integrated here in the mid case, where the lugs come out. So definitely not. You're not going to get the same experience, from this piece as you would get from the Corne de Vache, and that's why, between the two, from a purely what is an interesting perspective to me as a watch, the Corne de Vache wins hands down, right? You get a pulsation dial, you get a chronograph, you get a high horology piece from Vacheron or from Patek, but in this one you just get more. It's a more interesting watch. And so now when we really think about the other angle of this, because most people are right away in their mind are like, I'm going to go Patek all day because, I mean, come on, Tan, Patek versus Vacheron, you're going to go Patek all day. And like, from my perspective, sure, if that's what you really truly care about is just retaining your money, then yeah, go with a safe bet. Patek's your, whenever people ask me these questions, it's like, well, what are you seeking out of this watch? What are you seeking to get out of this watch? Is it personal enjoyment? Is it, is it movement aesthetics? Is it, wrist presence? What do you want? Because it's really hard for us to review watches because everybody's interest in watches are different. Everybody buys watches for a different purpose. Some people buy watches to flex, right? This isn't a flex watch. Even within the 5170 category, this is the least desirable 5170. This is the yellow gold with the pulsation dial with the Roman numeral. Like, not very interesting to most buyers. However, to the right buyer, this is the right watch for them. And so, yeah, like, purely from a resale value perspective, yeah, Patek's going to win out. But from an interesting bang per buck, what are you getting? Watch the Vacheron, hands down. And then really that comes into the whole point of, like, why do you collect watches? Are you collecting it to impress other people? Are you collecting it to, increase your investment portfolio? Like, why are you collecting watches? That is going to speak to the answer of your interest in all of these. And that's why on YouTube you have camps. You have all these camps of collectors, right? Because those camps are just people You know, we use the term different levels. I don't like that term. I don't believe that I'm at a different level than somebody who's just started collecting, right? I have a different interest in why I collect watches than somebody who's just collecting. But that doesn't mean that, and I'll just pick on Buckley from the other side because he is a good example of this. He says, I'm not a watch enthusiast. I like Rolex and I like AP and that's it. But I like what I like, right? For me to say I'm at a different level than that guy is completely trash. It's the stupidest thing to say because that's just what he likes. And that's why he buys watches. And he has a right to his opinion, right? Just like me, I like different things. It doesn't mean that I'm better than anybody or at a higher level or a lower level. I don't like that term. It's just a different interest. Okay. So we got Uzi Diamond here, Alibaba 69, $5. 10. If I do actually go to New York watch thing, should I double fist my diamond day date and a plain day date that's arriving Tuesday? Absolutely, Uzi Diamond. Like I was wearing. Everyone was talking about wearing fucking suits to the event, and I'm like, look, man, like I deal with people that are extremely wealthy all the time, and they ain't wearing suits like barely ever these days. So I'm gonna wear my hoodie. I'm gonna wear some jeans, and I'll wear a fucking perpetual calendar on my wrist because that's how I do. So Uzi Diamond, if you want to double fist, man, double fist. Like that's the way to do it. If anything, it's unique. It's going to be fun, and you're going to enjoy your piece. Now, yeah, and also Uzi Diamond, where we go in New York is quite safe. Gotham Hall is in Midtown Manhattan, and quite safe area, dude. Super fun, man. We had almost 40 people from the Archieverse fly in from all over the world. We had people fly in from Spain. We had people fly in from all parts of the United States, from Canada, and obviously Archie from Australia and all over the world. We had Mental Jock who was flying from the UAE, couldn't make it, got a little fucked up on his flight schedule. But yeah, man, really, really fun time, great people, and yeah, a lot of fun, a lot of shenanigans. Look, the Archieverse, when Archie comes on, it's been I know it's been the variety show, and I know that people are craving some watch talk. I really try to I bring some topics, just to make sure that the show flows. But reality is that, like, anybody in the chat can, you guys can all drive the topics. I'm here to enjoy a good watch talk with people. That's really why I do this, guys. Is why I first ever came on this show, to do watch talk with Archie, was because I do actually enjoy talking watches, just with a bunch of lads for having a drink and we're just hanging out, just enjoying the hobby that we love. So we got the conductor here who says, you're correct, 10. I also believe that the Corne de Vache retains its value to the same extent. Well, that's great if it does. However, I don't primarily consider watches in terms of resale value, as I collect them for my enjoyment. Conductor, that is the exact same way I collect watches. Look, a lot of us can say that that's the right way to collect watches. A lot of folks on the other side of, the investment sphere of it feel otherwise. And look, there's a lot of people that cross over on both. Fella is a good example. Fella is a true watch enthusiast. The guy buys, Patek Philippe's that I like and Archie likes. The reason he watches Archie is because he has a very similar interest in Calatravas and Patek Philippe's that Archie and I do. But Fella's also very, very conscious about, like, what are the watches that are, also, have potential, right? He'll send me messages saying, hey, I think the 5107 in platinum, and I'll pull you guys up the 5107. That, for those that don't know, I call this the ArchieLuxury Patek Philippe, because ArchieLuxury, in my opinion, really made this Patek Philippe extremely popular on YouTube. And so, for those that don't know, this is your simple Calatrava with a date, flat bezel, and this one's in platinum. So this was at a time when Patek Philippe you could identify a Patek Philippe platinum watch not by the Vesselton diamond necessarily at the 6 o'clock, but by the dial. Where Patek Philippe they would showcase their platinum watches with black dials. Okay, so Fella, this has been a watch on Fella's radar. And sorry, Fella, if I'm blowing you up here in terms of some of the secrets, a bit of the secret investment tips here. But Fella does believe that this watch has a huge amount of potential. Very well priced on the market right now. Not everybody's into the crown guards. I actually dig them. Not everybody's about them. But look, platinum watch. This is 37 millimeters. Again, 37. Most guys are in the 7 to 7, let's say 6 3/4 to 7 3/4 to 7.5 inch wrist. Like, your sweet spot in wrist size will probably be between. It'll probably be at 38.5 to 39 millimeters is probably your sweet spot. If you're buying dress watches, I would recommend 36 to 40 mils max on a dress watch. If you're buying a sport watch, I would recommend a size of 38 to 42 as probably your sweet spot if you've got a normal size wrist. If your wrist is bigger, obviously, you can get into the 44 mil size watches. If your wrist is smaller, you can dive into the 36 and 37 mil watches. But most people, I would say that this watch from a dress watch perspective or leather strap watch perspective, if you got a normal wrist, 37 mils, this watch will fit you just fine. If you're an absolute blob like ArchieLuxury, yeah, like it's going to be too small. And that's why I'm telling you guys, like, take what he says with a grain of salt, because he's also, he's probably significantly heavier than most of you guys are. And I'm no skinny bloke, like, and for me, this watch is just fine. So we got Mikey Casio GTR, good friend of mine from the UK, saying, would a Patek skeleton watch be a good investment, or taking a huge 100K turd? Look, Mikey Casio GTR, depends, obviously, what the watch is. If it's just your run-of-the-mill serially produced skeletonized piece, there's a few of them. I think George Varhees showcased one of his on the show last year at some point. He just got one. It was I think it was truly a skeletonized one. I think even Higgins and I were saying it wasn't even open worked; it was skeletonized. Yeah, like, in terms of resale value, I think CB kind of has it right, and I think George bought his on the secondary, so he didn't. I don't believe he took a hit. If you buy them right, obviously on the secondary, somebody else would have eaten the depreciation. And for those that haven't seen my avatar, it's the little name is A Lange and depreciation for those that can't see that. But if you want to avoid the depreciation, always buy on the secondary market when it comes to these. Alibaba says that looks nice. This is a real stunner. Uzi Diamond. It's one that, like, you could just wear with a sweater, just under the cuff. You got a lot of heft. You'll get some decent heft from the platinum, and really just a class piece. From my perspective. So we're actually rounding up here, guys. I think Mental Jock is going to be firing up here on the dungeon in a second if he's not live. Let me just go check. I haven't seen him go live yet, and yeah, he's actually gonna go live in about 10 minutes. So I got some time here with you guys. If there's any more watch questions or just riffing in the chat about watches, Kent knows what's up. That's a if you know watch. Like Uzi Diamond, I'll give you an example. I went to the U.S. Open tennis tournament last summer, and I was there with my cousin, and it was his tickets. He had booked the tickets. I guess his brother couldn't make it, so he just called me up and he's like, "Hey, would you want to go?" I'm like, "Yeah." So I'm like, "Yeah, I'll go." And then after I accept, he kind of then breaks down the news. He's like, "Yeah, by the way, the hotel I got is in Flushing, and it ain't that great, And I'm like, "That's okay. I don't mind slumming it. Like, I'm with my cousin. We basically grew up together. No big deal." And I brought my perpetual calendar because I was going to visit JJ. I was visiting Hoff and a bunch of other folks. And so I brought my perpetual calendar, and look, like, these watches, Uzi Diamond, they fly under the radar. Like, I was walking around Flushing in the middle of the night in some pretty shady areas, just grabbing food and stuff, like, wearing that watch, no problem. No, not a care in the world, because most people don't know what it is. And the people that do know what it is, will never rob you. So, yeah, it's a if you know watch. Whereas Uzi Diamond, if you're gonna go in full bore, with this, you're gonna go double fisting with the day date. Yeah, look, if you're in Manhattan, you're with the boys, yeah, there's no problems. Like, you'll be totally safe with it. But Uzi Diamond, you're gonna hear come October a lot of pussies saying, "Well, I'm not gonna bring my X, which is the new watch that they just got, because they're just chicken shit." Of whatever. And it's like, man, like, we're in a group of like fucking 40 people. Like, ain't nobody gonna jump you for your fucking watch. So don't worry about it. But definitely, it's if watch. Nice timepiece. Talk before shower and head out. Nice to see you, Mikey Casio GTR. Jock's actually going to be running the dungeon here in about 10 minutes. So if you want to do some gonzoing from the great city of London while he's on the stream, feel free to hop on. All right, we got LV with a question. AP 56175 quartz in steel or tantalum steel? LV, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna right away answer without even looking at this watch with the tantalum steel, because I do like AP's tantalum pieces. They're definitely they're definitely a talking point when you have them. Not very common, and I'll pull this up, but I have shown a few of these tantalum APs over the time period. So 56175 AP. 56175. I'll go with I'm going to tantalum first. See if I can pull up a tantalum version. 56175 tantalum. All right, so let's. I might go to Google Images for this one. But here we go. Tantalum piece. Like this one, Great Isle tantalum and steel bracelet. Like honestly, for me, the tantalum color, it's got a bit of, LV. It's just a bit darker, I would say, than steel. It's got a different shade than steel. So for me, the tantalum in steel is probably, especially if you're getting a quartz, right? Like number one, you're already getting a quartz AP. So a quartz and a steel is a bit vanilla, you could say. A tantalum and steel, you got the appeal of this watch just in the metal. Like if you were to tell me, hey, I got this watch in tantalum and steel, I'm actually interested in buying it simply because of the fact of the tantalum being different. Okay. Now, LV, this is also a very specific watch. A buyer of this watch would be a guy like me who's just a really big nerd into like, obscurities, I would guess, in terms of metals. Hoff on Smash, who's an AP Royal Oak aficionado, could probably appreciate the tantalum. I know Swiss from the Swiss and John show, as well as JJ's channel. He likes the tantalum Royal Oaks because of their obscurity, because of the way they look. So yeah, for me, LV, this is always going to be tantalum and steel without even looking at the watch. But this is the watch with tantalum and steel. Kent Angle is asking, Tan, did you see plenty of watches at the U.S. Open? Honestly, Kent, I went to, I think, the third round, and most of it was like Rolex Datejust. I saw steel Daytona ceramic with a black dial. I saw a few APs, no Patek, not even dress watch Pateks. I didn't see no Aquanauts, no Nautilus, mostly Rolex. So now, Kent, here was the thing. On center court, I believe that there was a bit more watch spotting. It was more the celebs that wore them on center court. I tried to watch, because you get better seats if you like watch some of the smaller courts, especially during those early rounds where you get a ticket for center court. Like you have a seat on center court, but then you can kind of walk around the stadium and go to other courts. And so that's where I was doing a lot of the watch spotting, because I'd be a little bit further in, closer to the court. And I try to look around, but mostly Rolex, so not a ton. So I wasn't super impressed. But there were articles about the watches that were spotted at the U.S. Open. Topes from Donkey says, if you're in a big enough group, you're probably safe, even in a crime-riddled Democrat run shithole. Yeah, I didn't feel unsafe, Topster, wearing my Patek, and honestly, unless you're like Uzi Diamond, what he's describing is he's probably gonna wear a short sleeve shirt, like fucking double fisting 2 yellow gold day-dates. Like, yeah, that will likely attract attention, or could attract attention. If you're just wearing a Hulk on the wrist, I think you'll fly under the radar unless someone's really trying to case you. And honestly, I think you'd be just fine in New York City. Again, that's just my perspective. I don't live in New York City. I'm sure Hoff and JJ will think I'm absolutely nuts. I'm sure they'll say in other parts of New York City, you probably wouldn't want to do that. But I think where we were in Midtown, especially with the group we had, like I was not worried. And again, you're going to have, like, usually speaking, in the New York event, like every night we had anywhere from 20 to 40 people with us. So I just can't see it, right? I felt super safe. Great people, like awesome time, just everybody vibing, and it's not always about Archie, guys. Like a lot of, it was, Blondie was amazing. Kelsowitz was amazing. Jamie Opulence, like these are great people. Gary was there, life of the party. So highly recommend it. We are going to be doing an event for our UK base. Archie will be. I know he's talking about. Oh, I'm not sure, but we're trying to get Archie there for June 15th for the Time London watch show. That's with D Time Love, Paul Thorpe, all of our good friends in the UK. Archie is looking to attend. He will be in the UK for, I think he's trying for more than a week. I think he's trying for a couple of weeks in the UK so that it can be worth his while. Um, Mostly centered probably in the south around London, but I'm going to try to see if he can travel. Like hopefully when I go there, I'm going to be seeing ABC up in Birmingham. So hopefully Archie will make the trip up to Birmingham, or if Dodger's around, I'd love to see Birmingham with Dodger. Have a curry with Dodger, and like the real fun areas like Sparkbrook or Spark Hill, where I like to go to with to eat some of that Indian food. But yeah, I think it's going to be a great time, guys, in the UK. And so if you guys are around in June, mid-June, we're going to try to have Archie there in the UK for our UK base. And yeah, we're going to do the same thing, guys. I'm going to try to go to a couple pubs, like maybe some of the oldest pubs in London. We could do a little thing there, and then maybe a curry night. Do a nice curry dinner, and just have a good time. Like London's a real fun place, and we got a lot of great fans in the London area. So yeah, and John Seltzer says it himself. You're fine in Midtown. Like honestly, not even a worry in the world, John. But like there were a lot of people that like Bear. I understand why he didn't bring his watches, because Canadian customs can be a bit of a bitch when you go back, in terms of like, where did you get the watch? Did you pay the taxes and stuff like that? And I know Bear does everything above board. It's just the hassle, guys. Like you guys don't realize when you go back, they specifically look, it's not like in Europe where you just walk through the declare or no declare line and, it's kind of the honor system. In Canada, it's like they're looking to make their tax money. And if you haven't paid the tax, it's just not worth it. It's not worth it not paying the tax. Like it's going to cause you too many issues. Just do it above board. I know Bear does it above board. And for that purpose, he just doesn't want the hassle. He's like, fuck it. I'm not going to deal with that. I'll just bring my Tudor, which is is a cheap watch that honestly they don't care about. So yeah, kudos to him. It's a smart move. We got LV's asking thoughts on the Patek 541 with brigade numerals and steel as a dress watch. Right, look at the 541. This is a classic Patek Philippe. 541 in steel. Actually, looks like let's put this one on. We'll find a good photo for it. I mean, obviously, vintage Pateks had a complete. They had a lot of different pieces in vintage, and a lot of different. What's funny? I don't know why this is pulling up as a 541. Oh no, here we go. For a second there, my Google Images, whatever was showing me the preview, was showing me this watch as a 541, but it was showing a square watch. And I know the 541 is a Calatrava. It's not a square or a gondolo shaped watch. This is from a Christie's auction. Really, actually, this one performed extremely well. Obviously, for a reason it performed well, because the estimate on this auction was only 8,000 to 12,000 Swiss francs. Price realized was obviously like significantly higher than that, at almost 40,000 Swiss francs. So look, manufactured in 1939, so it is classic Calatrava. This one, I would assume, went up in price because of the retailer. Maybe there's a connection, from that perspective, maybe of the buyer, that this made, was an important piece from that, or it's just really rare to have that signature on it. In terms of, again, this is also going to be very specific. It is, from a size perspective, quite small from a modern size. It's a 31 millimeter watch, because it is from the 30s, guys. This isn't a piece that is like modern by any standard. It's from the 30s, and so I would say that for a vintage Patek Philippe collector, this watch is great. It's cool. For if you're gonna, I don't know, like the folks that are wearing the vintage watch, they have a different attire. They try to wear a bit more sartorial. There's a great YouTube channel and Instagram. I think it's Mark Cho. I think that's his name. I could be wrong. He runs a fashion or men's clothing store in New York, as well as other places. Last name's Cho, I believe. I could be wrong with his first name. But he has like I don't know if it was a 96 or a Patek 570, the vintage, and he wears the 33 mils with a bit of a different sartorial style. You can pull it off. It's not. It'll be a lot harder, in my opinion. So cool watch, cool to collect. Practicality of wearing that in person may be difficult. So that's kind of where I would come from. Like, this is erring on the side of being too small, and will probably look in today's day and age a bit ridiculous, or it could be. Uzi Diamond says, Patel, my cousin said he'd go with me. Cool. Yeah, bro. Like, I'm telling you, man, like, you'll be totally fine. Like, you literally, you know, as long as as long as you know where to go and you're not going to the just areas you're not supposed to go with those kind of things, you're not doing anything dumb. Common sense, Uzi Diamond. If you have common sense, which I've seen you on the panel, you seem like a guy that has a lot of common sense. Like, yeah, I think you'll be just fine. So let me have another look here to see if Jaco has gone live on the dungeon. And he is. So we'll wrap here, guys. I'm gonna send the link over to Mental Jock. Hopefully you guys enjoyed about an hour and a half of watch talk. And yeah, we're gonna be enjoying some of the drama, a bit of the recap. And yeah, don't forget to hit the like button, upvote, super chat on your way out if you want to. If not, I will see you guys in a few hours on the Archie Main Show as well as on the dungeon coming up next. Take care, guys. I'm not even gonna run an outro. I'll just send you guys over there straight away. Have fun.